afternoon, everyone. Good morning to the listener that will join us post the live sessions. I'm Florence Dombrico. I help leaders and teams building capacity for the future. And I'm delighted to welcome you today for this third episode of Self-Leadership Habits for Leaders. Self-leadership is about building capacity for the future and being intentional about it, that we can influence what is happening in our lives, in our systems. As leaders, self-leadership gives us tools to be intentional in our leadership. And today, we're going to explore what can help us handle complexity. Feel free to ask any question as we go along. We will look at them with my guests. And if we do not have the time to look at every question, we will address them post the session. And my guest today is Nouri Sazen. Nouri is director at Safran Interactive. Her background is from consulting, and she's been leading Safran, an innovative learning technology provider, for about 14 years. Right now, Nouri's curiosity is really around enabling self-directed learning, so topical with self-leadership. And with the team, they've developed ADA, an AI coaching solution, which can help democratization of coaching, as well as providing great tools to actually implement habits. Very, very exciting. So good morning, Nouri, and welcome with us today.
Good morning, Florence. I'm so pleased to be talking to you and with everyone today.
Excellent. And we've got really fascinating subject, not the easiest one, because we're going to talk about handling complexity. I was wondering this morning from what angle to start this one, because it is actually complexity. So maybe what if we were to start first by what we mean by complexity? How do we see it through our lives?
Yeah, I think the odd thing is that we have always had to deal with complexity, and we deal with it in our daily lives, don't we? Relationships are complex. Handling work and life balance is all complex. But somehow we think of it differently at work. And the way we think about it generally at work is like, okay, if something's complex, we need to actually break it down into simple steps. And I think that used to work quite well previously, but I'm finding it quite not working as well now, because I think the world has changed. And let me sort of explain what I mean by that. There are so many more things that are hitting our brains all at the same time that even relatively non-complex situations are making it difficult for us to take a step and actually think about whether this is just difficult, whether you're just a little bit overawed with things, or whether actually it is a complex situation. And I think that first step is maybe to take that step back and think about that.
There's two things I really love. I really love that one of the first things come up is that notion of stepping back, because this was actually the subject of the first episode of this series. And for me, it's kind of a must implement habit of self-leadership, to do that on a regular basis. I also love the way you said that this is part of our everyday life. And outside of work, we seem to integrate it without even bothering about it. Relationships are complex. That's so true. Humans are complex. The human brain is complex, and we just play with it, and we don't make a fuss about it. So there is this interesting thinking you bring that at work, we actually see different. And I'm just wondering if it's because at work we want to be so controlling about everything on every output.
I think that's the key thing, is that suddenly you're a leader and everyone is expecting you to make a decision, about something that, is a difficult situation. And that sort of autocratic leadership, comes into play, even if you've got a very consensus-based situation within the organization and culture. When something is complex or difficult, the decision making rises to the top because you're the leader, so you make the decision as such. And I think then there is a tendency to not necessarily step back and to start thinking, oh, I've got to make a decision and I've got to make something quite quick.
Mm.
And I think that is where the complexity or difficulty becomes the situation where you really struggle with either making a decision or even tackling it in the first place.
So that we have the making and the tackling of the decision. Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow we feel that we have to make a decision. And there might be a cause for restraint. So it's a paradox, isn't it? Because on the one
It
hand,
is.
you don't want to ignore it. The situation is not going to go away, however much you want it to go away. So as you said, there has been intentional restraint or a decision to act. And I think that the first thing, I mean, personally, that I do is do that physiological sigh, you know, do that step back mechanism, inflate your lungs to the maximum capacity twice. You don't think that you can do it anymore. Keep inflating, and then that slow exhale. And I think the complexity when you do that, it actually physically slows down your heartbeat, and that actually starts clearing the mind in terms of being able to even tackle this in the first place. Because if you make a decision, off the top of your head, and it is a complex situation, you're going to regret it.
That is so true. No, there is a lot of things I love in everything what you said just now. So that easy mechanism, take deep breathing. I have something similar. For me, it's more like a bottle of water. I regularly would force myself to drink some water. Right? It does similar effect. It has the advantage to actually it forces us to step back, and even if it's only 60 seconds, it actually forces us to step back. It has the other advantage, as exactly as you say, to calm down the breathing, to just put us in a different mindset that it can clear the mind. It also have a very biological simple effect, is bring oxygen to the brain, either through the air or through the water. And the brain does need a lot of nutrients to kind of being able to make decisions. So this is something I really love, because there is one thing in self-leadership that comes very strongly is we are an embodied brains. Our brain is into our body, and a lot of the mechanism we have is conditioned by the fact we are an embodied brain. And the brain is not just our mind is an element that allows our mind, but it's a connection. The brain and the mind, and the brain, the body, and the system is going to create the minds. And it's the mind that's going to handle the complexity, not just the brain. So there is this that I find it's really nice. And there is also something that's kind of is kind of ironic, because stepping back, we could see stepping back as it is a decision. My first decision is a step back to really look at the situation, but we never think as taking a moment to step back being part of a decision mechanism. We see it as it's not, we should not. So I just wonder if this is the immediacy of the culture we've created when everything has to happen right now, and where we mix up urgent and immediate, urgent, and priority. It becomes very blurry, and we have to go solution, rather than just like, but what is really the problem we're looking at?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that could be something there. And I just love that sentence from Einstein. If I have 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'm going to spend 55 minutes in making sure I have the right problem and 5 minutes in looking for the solutions. So there is something here. Now, another thing that caught my hearing when you were saying, this, because it's complex and there's a decision to come, there is whatever culture within the organization you have created, you have this autocratic leadership coming up. Which is interesting because here again we see how the system and the context can change something. Let's explore that before we take a question we have from the audience.
Sure. I mean, we very much at Saffron practice, if you like, joint leadership or shared leadership, because, as you said, there are complex problems now that have to be dealt with, and everyone's different perspectives on things. Something that I might actually find complex, other people may not. So I don't assume anymore that I have a, if you like, the end decision on things. And the other thing that I think is really important is that if the problem is this complex, you're never going to necessarily get consensus. If you have shared leadership, you may not have consensus. So I think one of the things that we practice is holding strong opinions lightly, because as leaders, if you have strong opinions, that's all good, but you need to be able to be open to hear others' perspectives around a complex situation. And there is a sense of a gut feeling that you have, and I think that is based on values. And again, those values are different amongst a leadership team. But I think it's always important then, when you're sort of agreeing a way forward, to always talk about the values on which you're basing those decisions. Because I think that then provides a little bit of clarity around the situation. So I think shared leadership, steeped in value, and an open conversation is an open shared conversation is a technique or a habit that can be inculcated in organizations.
So we have something nice here with this notion that actually handling complexity can be facilitated with a habit of shared leadership somewhere. And also something you said that really cracked me up. It was, we have to hold strong opinion lightly. And again, we have this polarity we keep seeing on that subject, strong and lightly. That kind of nourishes the debate. Now we got a question from Molly Curtis. Are there any tools you use to enable a proactive approach to developing habits that helps with handling complexity? Personally, I use one. It's a very simple tool. It's in my calendar. I have a daily reminder to step back. Like that, I got this daily reminder to take 5 minutes to think about proactivity. And by thinking like that is kind of taking 5 minutes to step back to look at what is happening, what I'm trying to create, what are my intentions, that I can keep this proactive approach. So for me, there will be really these intentions. And in that step back, I know I usually go also into looking for simplicity. So maybe that's also something I like to do is I have this sensation that we're extremely good at making things even more complex than they are. And that sometimes it's about really going back to simplicity by going back to factual and what really we have power over, rather than just wanting to just do everything. So that would be one of my proactive, one of the two will be the invite to step back, and the habit will be still a bit stepping back and being intentional. What about you, Nori? How would you use at the moment?
The bit that I find difficult is the strong opinions lightly held. So I'll try in every meeting to step back and not say anything until everyone else has hopefully had a chance to speak. Um, and and that's because, you know, I do hold very strong opinions. I'm opinionated, and I know I am. So that's one of the things that I try to do very consciously, is to be open to those different perspectives, because often they will add to you know, the opinion that I have, or they will make me think again. And that's really important, I think, in that leadership, because, you know, these decisions, as we say, you know, they do have they are usually made in the context that you see them in at that moment. But complexity means that, you know, things are usually adaptive. They are going to change. So, you know, taking the round in how people see these different perspectives over this situation is really important. So that's my conscious tool, if you like, that I try to shut up
Yeah,
for 5 minutes.
love it. Being quite opinionated as well. In a good French way, like, yes, we have opinions. We just argue for our opinions. I do have also this reminder, speak last, to make sure you hear the different perspective. But what is interesting in that habits you've implemented, it's really to encourage different perspective coming. So it's encouraging being able to see different elements within the system that you can actually, with the team, have a more comprehensive view of that complexity somewhere. So
Okay.
it's a mechanism to see the complexity better. And I love how we go back to, because we had system coming a bit at the beginning. So we bring back this notion of system to handle complexity. We cannot be just looking at one level. We have to look at different level. And
Yeah.
I'm actually going to cut again each time today. To nothing about this one, but he had something to say. He often says, a problem cannot be solved at the level it has been created. Um, for me, it echoes really this notion of handling complexity. Sometimes things may be complex because we're looking them at the wrong level. And maybe if we switch to another level and we go back to stepping back and switching perspective, we may be able to see different elements that's going to maybe take away the complexity, maybe bringing simplicity where we're not thinking about it. Um, Simplicity is something for me that is very strong. It's kind of a principle I try to apply. If something is not simple somewhere, it's not yet the right things.
Mm.
But it's true that it has to, not everything can be simple, but within something, every element could be simple and coming together. We tend to make things complicated because we pile up things on top of each other. Like, for example, when I work with teams, sometimes their complex are highly complicated, but because I make them complex, but because they pile up things on top of each other rather than just really stepping back and rethinking, how do we do that? So we have this notion of managing the process, the big picture, that we can do things different. How do you see the principle of simplicity being something that could help us to handle complexity?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of keeping things simple as well. In fact, I think that's hardest to do, even, you know,
Mm.
in the daily work that we do in terms of the learning content that we provide. You know, how do you actually make this simple? Because, you know, content can be written in a way that, you know, really doesn't speak to the learner, for example. So how do you actually get to the nugget of what it is that you're trying to actually transfer in terms of either knowledge or get application? And I think that those really simple questions is, you know, right at the beginning, and almost brainstorming that, well, you know, what is the big deal about this? You know, what's the consequences if we don't do this? Who's this going to impact? Is this a short-term issue or is it a long-term issue? Do we have to act now, or should we actually wait to see X,
Mm.
Y, and Z happen? I think those kinds of questions worked together really do actually, you know, get to the nub of what it is that is making us feel complex. And I think the other feel that this is a complex issue. And I think the other thing is to recognize emotion. You know,
Mm.
this is making me nervous because, you know, I'm fearful of, or I'm uncomfortable with, you know, because we feel it, and articulating it takes the emotion out of things to keep it simple in a way, so that you're actually focusing on the right thing rather than the negative emotion, if if you see what I mean. So yeah,
I'm
I think being open again about how it's making you feel is actually a really good way of stepping outside of that to try and find that simplicity.
I was laughing because before we open the live session, I ran a quick query on ChatGPT. If you don't do that, you miss something at the moment. Uh, though I don't think ChatGPT is giving us more information than we have, but it was like, what are the top five self-leadership habits you would recommend? And strengthen emotional resilience coming in number four. So this notion to actually acknowledge the emotion and being able to accept it
Mm.
without letting the emotion taking over what you're actually doing. It's just like you accept it and you embrace it, maybe stronger, you accept it and you just keep what you're doing, just going for it. But I'm looking at the other three before. We have practical mindful awareness, and the focus is really on deep breathing. Uh, and we use that. Prioritize ruthlessly. Love the ruthlessly. Prioritize. Okay. Cultivate adaptability. So I sometimes have an issue with the word adaptability, because for me, if I cultivate adaptability, I'm always reacting to something when actually I want to be proactive. And I will come back to the question from Molly, this notion to be proactive in how we approach things. That would be more stronger for me. And the last one, the fifth tips given is build decision-making framework, structured decision-making to reduce paralysis and improve outcome.
Mm.
So it's kind of, yeah, yeah, ChatGPT could making a few more things, but it's okay, getting there. We're
I,
getting close to the, yeah,
yeah, sure, we're getting close to the end. I know.
yeah,
I just
but
wanted to,
it's okay. That's
yeah, I just wanted
go
to
for
add
it.
one more thing, which I think is a tolerance for failure. You know,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know, I
yes,
think
we were about
when
to forget this
yeah,
one.
yeah, when you're sort of, you know, making decisions that are situationally based because they are so complex, you can only
Mm,
see what's ahead of you and around you, and you can, you know, mitigate those issues that you see. But there's always the, you know, unforeseen or the
yeah.
serendipitous. And so having that tolerance for failure, I think, is, you know, something that you really have to build into a habit, and understanding that this may fail, but that's okay. We learn from it and we move on. And so that shift in terms of adaptability, if you like, I think is a good thing.
That is an amazing element to close the call, actually, this shift in mindset and failure. And I could have a self-leadership habit just on this one, because I question what makes us being so against failure when everything has been only possible because failure has happened before. And even for us learning how to walk, if we did not accept to fail when we were just babies, we would never have learned how to walk. We would still be crawling on the ground. I don't think anything would work with that. So, what make us
Exactly.
turn as a society that suddenly failure was really such a big no-go, not talked about? So I love that conclusions. So a real thank you, Nori, for this fascinating conversation. A real thank you for the audience and Molly for your question that could really feed us towards something quite nice. Our next conversation, our next episode is with Fatima Ribeiro, my next guest, and we're going to explore next Thursday, November 28th at 11:30 CET. We're going to explore what habits we can use to strengthen, to encourage diversity and inclusions. So that's going to be something very interesting. Now, remember, when you want to know more on how self-leadership can help you or your organization, just reach out to me. You can do that via Discovery Call or LinkedIn. And for information, my next cohort program is starting this January 2025. Registration is ongoing, and that's going to be extremely exciting. Now, thank you to you, listener, for being with us today. Thank you again, Nori, for your conversation. I love
Thank
it.
you, Florence.
And we see you next week. And we see you on a replay for the people that unfortunately could not join us. Ciao.
Ciao. Thanks.